Alrighty, so week 2 on deck. And this week, depending on how you approach it, is either going to feel totally fun or totally crazy or somewhere in between. So, the first thing I want to start with is this. And I may have said this in some other way in some other video, but I'm going to say it again. I do not recommend that you do both Monday night and Thursday night items in the same sitting. What I recommend you do is actually work on this class as many days as you can and as much forward as you can, because the more time between the time that you watch and do the code along until the point that you actually do the learn togethers is going to give you an opportunity to integrate some of that knowledge and to think about how you want your particular code, meaning your learn together code, to work. So do again, I can't dictate, not again, I shouldn't say that. I cannot, nor should I, tell you how to do this, but I can highly suggest that you, considering 9 weeks, 4 units programming class, and even in whatever level of experience you have, the more time that you give this to get into your brain and into your muscle memory, the better off it's going to be for you. So, let's actually talk about a little bit, just an overview, and then I have some really important topics because our next week is our first code review. So let's jump in. Okay, so let me get rid of me for a minute here. I'm playing with a new tool to do that. All right, so here we are. I'm actually recording this at the beginning of week 1, so I've only got a chance to grade one item at this point, so I don't have any too much. I know that this was a lot, but I'm looking forward to having some of you get caught up here because, it is definitely a process, I know. All right, so this week, let me actually, because these I've already recorded, and I recorded them today, and I created a new set of instructions, so those will stand on their own. But what I did along the way is I kind of made some notes just to so we could be clear about a couple of things. Like this week, we have one whole section in the Udemy course for Monday and another section for Thursday. And so I just want to give you that heads up as you're starting in. Again, the reason I mentioned I wouldn't do them in one sitting. If it was me, I would do as much code along as my brain would allow me to comprehend. And how do you know when you are at that point? Quite honestly, I would say one of the indicators is when he gets to the challenges. If it just is not coming at all, then I definitely would either take a break or go back and review some of the basic information, or not basic, but the information in that lecture, or ask questions and come see me. That'd be the other thing, right? So my office hours are listed over in the syllabus. Definitely come see me. The more you can talk to me or anyone about code, the better off your experience of our first dev will, and for you will be, because that talking to someone definitely helps. Okay. On many different levels, trust me. All right. So, what I'm going to do is I've already made my Dev Zero available. But what I did do here is below just the standard comment for how weekly attendance works, I copied from week 3. Now, let that sink in. Next week is your first dev project, and here are the instructions that are listed in that week 3. And all I've done here is I've copied them over, and I've walked through a video, and it's done from spring 20. Okay, so and it probably covers my rock, scissors, paper. I actually have an updated code example I have for this one, which is tracking my electric car usage. But you know what I could do is go ahead and load this one over as well. So here's my suggestion for this particular item is I'm going to suggest that you take some time and look through these requirements. Watch this video. I talk about the style guide. By this time you got to here, I will give both the code example for what I did last semester with my electric car charging and that. So, but that content is there. But here's really what I want to say in addition to what we've already talked about. Okay. So let me come back to you here is that the thing that you're working on right now, the topic of your code for your learn togethers is not the code you're going to use for your dev work. So you need to be thinking about during this week, like, what is it that I would do for my development, my first dev project? Because here's the concept is you're going to come up with a new concept. You're going to write code that meets my requirements. And basically it's going to be all the major things that we've covered, right? It's going to have, I'm going to let that actual content stand on its own and check that out, right? But what you want to do is come up with what you're going to write for this semester for your dev work. And this first one, right, is well, it is the first one and it's in week 3. So I just want you to know, walk away understanding here, hopefully, is that you're going to write different code that's not related to the code you've already written for the learn togethers. You're writing something completely different for your dev work. Okay. That's what I want you to know there. Okay. Again, I got to get rid of me. Okay. So consider that, look at that. I will have signups in your week 3 for you to sign up and send stuff out on Discord. But you do schedule appointments with me. Again, I talk about that here. Okay, I just want to say a word as we move into this week. So, what we've been doing, and let me just move to my editor real quick. What we've been doing, and this week we're moving to require, instead of using, you can still use console.log to output things. And here's the example I have here, right? But from here forward, for all of our learn together work, and I would say to you also for, I'm sorry, learn together work, you need to use my show on page function and pass whatever you normally would use console.log in order to output to the page. Now you have instruction on that. You had it from week 1. I gave you just a repeat link on week 2. But the thing I want you to say, because I've seen a couple of students run into this, is that once you use this show on page function, running it at the command line, let me just open that real quick and just show you what I mean by this. Open an integrated terminal. Like if I tried to run Node and I tried to run app.js at this point, I'll get an error because Node, and that's really the thing about Node, if you ever take Node, which I hope I get to teach Node in the near future again, because I really enjoyed Node, which is basically JavaScript on the server, does not understand the document because the document is the window. So once you move to having this show on page function as your output, and again, you can still use this to show console.log, but once you have this on there and running it like he is running it in the, sorry, I should just use the, running it at the command line will no longer work. So I just want you to know that so you don't, if you see that, you understand why that happens. Okay. So and you could, I would actually recommend if you want to also play with this function that you're learning about called the one, and it's just a simple function. I actually ended up hacking it a little bit for my this week learn together code. I used it to output just a line. It was kind of it was a small hack, but you could use this concept also for your code along where you normally put output just to get more experience. Okay. Now, the other thing I will tell you is that the GitHub workflow that we're learning, there is a series of in the browser GUI interfaces or GUI options. And what I mean by that, just to show you, I don't recommend it, but I'm just going to show you, right, is there is like all these changes where I would normally do git add. I could just hit plus here and it would add all of these this is the equivalent of git add. And then I could sync, I could commit, sorry, there's my message, right? So you can. I just don't recommend it when you're starting out because you want to get used to that command line. Okay. Just FYI. And then, but you can if you feel more comfortable after you get used to it. Obviously, I can't tell you how to do it. I'm just telling you how I think is best to learn it. Now, on the Git branching, so branching. So if you don't know, if you're really doing development work, you would actually use branching to where you write some code and then branches are the idea of that you take that base code and then you add some functionality to it without modifying that beginning code base. Okay. Let me see if I can bring you back here to chat about that because that is, and maybe the visual will help, right? So I don't at this point require branching. I might after the first dev project for our Learn Together because it kind of makes sense what we're doing there is a branch. But and if you're familiar with branches, you could do this for your Learn Together work as well. It's the idea of like once you write some code and then I say, okay, add this type of functionality to it, what you're doing is keeping the code that you started with, the base code intact. You're creating a branch, basically a copy, and then you're working over here without touching this code when you're implementing a new particular functionality. And then logical next step working in teams is that when this is all ready, then you merge back into that original branch, that main branch, that new code. I personally, for this particular class, like you to have folders because that way it's just easier to go back and look. But it's maybe my concern that I've thrown too much and I don't want to have it to confuse you as well. But it's really okay if you felt like, you know what, I've had enough experience. I'm totally going to do that. It's totally up to you. It's optional, but it's good experience. And if you want a video on that, totally let me know. There's some good content I could do as well. So this is kind of the thing I started with today, which is as much as you can work ahead because otherwise this is going to feel okay. This is going to feel like a fire hose. And I think by this week after, as you reply, given and maybe it would be good to have the attendance at the end. That's something actually I've been thinking about is putting attendance at the end of the list of items. So, FYI. And do please go check out my office hours. They're in the syllabus. Uh, Wednesday is my late 5 to 6 office hour, right? I definitely recommend coming to see me and talking about code gives you a better understanding of code. And because we're all online, the best way to do that is for Zoom, unless you're lucky enough to have somebody in your life that is in the industry, right? So that's my suggestion. Look at my office hours, work ahead whenever you can. Know that this week is a vital week because we're going to cover functions and we're going to cover objects. And walking away with us understanding of these two concepts. I mean, any programming language you take, you're going to get these concepts. But in this case, you're getting them in the way JavaScript thinks. And that's really what you want to learn. You want to learn, like I often think about this, what would Java, like think in the way JavaScript thinks, so to speak. Maybe that's not a great analogy, but so let me ask you as a reply. You can reply to any of the stuff I've talked about so far, any of it. But if you have nothing else to reply, what I would like to ask you is, what, how does this class feel coming into week 2 after week 1? Does it, and you're like, again, maybe it's at the end that you have a better idea because this week is pretty solid. And, really maybe the thing you want to tell me about is after you review Dev 0, this actually is probably a better reply, is like any questions or clarification that you have for what that work entails because from an overall perspective and a grade perspective, right, 25% of your grade comes from code alongs, 25% from Learn Together. So that's 50% of the class. The other 50% comes from this dev work, which tells you how important I believe the ability to come up with a concept, understand the language enough to implement this concept is. All right, I'll shut up. Have a great one. I'm going to release week 2 today, which is in week 1 on Tuesday. I'm going to try to keep this schedule to where I at least give you a week ahead as much as possible. Have a good one.